Tonight we slip into a powdered dreamscape where fashion and food collide in the most impractical place imaginable, your hair. Picture it. You're wearing a wig so massive it makes your head a kind of snack-filled spaceship, orbiting through candlelit ballrooms and velvet-carpeted drawing rooms. There's a marzipan apple pressed behind your ear, a sugar-dusted biscuit nestled beneath your curls, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny slice of cheese tucked in the folds of your hairpiece. Don't move too quickly, or dessert might tumble to the floor. This is Georgian England, and snacks in wigs are officially a thing. And yes, you probably won't survive this. Between the hair powder, the melting sugar, and the spontaneous vermin, being stylish in 1775 is a full-contact sport. But don't worry. I'll guide you through every sticky, crumb-filled moment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it? Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in London, or Bath, or maybe some breezy country estate near the South Downs. Either way, you're a lady of means. And that means towering hair. You sit patiently while your hairdresser, his breath thick with claret and regret, pins, powders, and props your wig into a confectionery monument. It's nearly 2 feet tall, stiff with pomatum, a delightful paste made of lard and scented oils, and dusted with flowery white powder. A single false bird perches on one side. A ribbon dangles on the other. Somewhere inside, your emergency macaroon. The year is 1774. George III rules the land. Mozart is a teenager with a harpsichord. And the higher your hair, the higher your status. But also, let's be honest, the more space you have to hide your late afternoon snacks. These wigs aren't your Halloween store affairs. They are elaborate, heavy, almost architectural. The base structure includes pads, wireframes, and even small wooden inserts. They're often sewn or pinned to your natural hair, then layered with frizzed horsehair and sculpted into shapes that range from towering poofs to entire battle reenactments. Yes, really. On top of this, you get powdered. Not a gentle sprinkle, no, we're talking full baking flour dust storm. The scent? Lavender, rose, and occasionally, civet. Which is a nice word for musky cat gland juice. You sit perfectly still, because moving might collapse the entire operation. Plus, you're pretty sure the petit four you wedged into the left curl is starting to melt. But hey, snack security is all about risk management. By the late 18th century, wigs aren't just fashion, they're spectacle. And in the quiet pockets of that spectacle, something odd starts to happen. Women, ingenious, slightly bored, always hungry women, start experimenting. They slip tiny wrapped bonbons into the folds. Tuck candied violets behind silk flowers. Stash licorice strings behind fake curls. Nobody says it out loud, of course. You don't just admit you're using your wig like a snack drawer. But everyone knows. There are whispers, of course. The Duchess of Devonshire was rumoured to have kept sugared walnuts under her ostrich plume. A countess from Dorset was said to carry a whole fig tartlet in her back bouffant, covered with a lace veil and an attitude of perfect innocence. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a flamboyant few pushing boundaries. Diaries mention it, but rarely directly. Etiquette manuals are suspiciously vague on the topic. But satire prints, those gloriously mean-spirited cartoons from the likes of Gilray and Rowlandson, are far less discreet. One drawing shows a society lady leaning forward at a ball, a string of cherries dangling from her wig into her mouth. Another features a woman at the opera nibbling a breadstick from her hair while pretending to yawn. You have to wonder how this all began. Some say it was born from practicality. Those long evenings at court could stretch on for hours, with meals hours apart and no vending machines in sight. A hidden biscuit could mean the difference between dignity and stomach grumbles loud enough to echo off marble walls. Others suggest it started as a prank or rebellion. A sly wink at the absurdity of the whole fashion system. Oh, you want me to carry an entire pastoral landscape on my head? Fine. I'll make it double as my dessert tray. And let's not forget the social power of having something others didn't. A snack-laced wig wasn't just clever, it was exclusive. It said you had access to delicacies. You had a maid skilled enough to balance a sugared plum behind a wax flower. You had the audacity to bend the rules of etiquette for your own edible amusement. The texture of your wig, firm, slightly sticky, and sweet-smelling, makes it strangely ideal for light food storage. Not warm foods, obviously, that would lead to a melted nightmare, but firm sweets, dried fruits, nuts, and the occasional wrapped truffle. Totally doable. Especially if your maid is both discreet and double-jointed. Of course, accidents happen. Once, during a particularly steamy night in June, Lady Maribella Thornwick's wig began to droop mid-minuet. A sugar-dusted apricot lodged in the frame broke loose and splattered onto a guest's powdered shoulder. It was not received well. But that's the gamble, isn't it? The tightrope walk between elegance and edible disaster. That's what makes it thrilling. Now, you're standing in front of the mirror, tilting your head just slightly to test the balance. Everything's in place. The lace veil is perfectly draped, the powdered curls set like marshmallow waves. You can just barely smell the rosewater and the faintest hint of candied pear. You're ready. Hair full of secrets. Head full of snacks. Let the evening begin. You descend the stairs like you're gliding, not walking, because gliding is what one must do when your hair weighs more than a small child and contains at least 3 snack items with the structural integrity of a sugar cube. The candlelight dances off the powdered dome atop your head, and as you pass the butler, you swear he nods, just slightly, as if acknowledging the secret almond cluster stashed in the wig's back quadrant. A fellow connoisseur, perhaps. You arrive at the drawing room, where the air is thick with rosewater, powdered starch, and the desperate scent of social ambition. Everywhere you look, there are wigs. Tall ones, flat ones, some shaped like ships mid-voyage, others like towers about to fall. Some are so absurdly sculpted you half expect birds to fly out. One woman sports what looks like a hedgehog made of spun sugar. You're tempted to ask for a nibble, but decorum wins, for now. Fashion in Georgian England is less about what you wear and more about what you prove. Your wig says everything. Its height. Your wealth. Its scent. Your refinement. Its contents. Well, that depends. There's a reason wigs got so big, literally and figuratively. In the 1760s and 70s, Marie Antoinette and her English counterparts embraced the pouf style, a towering mass of hair that could rise over 3 feet. These weren't subtle statements. They were wearable propaganda. Some poufs displayed naval victories, complete with tiny cannons. Others celebrated childbirth, with scenes of cherubs and cradles. You'd think these women were walking dioramas, and you'd be right. Underneath the grandeur, there was also fierce competition. It wasn't enough to have a big wig. You needed the biggest. And if it included a clever element like, say, a small, delicately wrapped jam tart, it only made your headpiece more enviable. Men weren't immune to the madness. While their wigs remained smaller, more powdered, and usually confined to neat ponytails called queues, they watched the women's fashions grow wilder. One minister famously quipped that a lady's wig could now store the national deficit and probably lunch for the cabinet, too. Still, this wasn't just ridiculous vanity. There was method in the madness. These elaborate hairpieces symbolized control over nature. In an age when cities were filthy, disease was rampant, and nothing could stay clean for long, your immaculately powdered pouf represented triumph. A human-made, perfumed order in a world of chaos. But historians still argue whether the wig craze truly reflected social ambition, or whether it became a parody of itself over time. Did the aristocracy embrace these styles as a serious statement, or were they already in on the joke? Either way, if your hair could hold a sculpture, it could hold a snack. You move through the room like you've rehearsed it, which you have. A half-turn here, a modest tilt there. Nothing that would shift the delicate sugar bundle tucked above your left temple. The key to successful snack hair navigation is posture. A single wobble could send candied pistachios raining down onto Lord Fenwick's lap, and no one wants to be remembered that way. A plump dowager duchess waddles by, trailing a ribbon of violet perfume and whispering to her niece, "It smells like someone's baking." You freeze. Is it you? Is your wig leaking sugar scent again? You panic briefly before realizing Lady Morsington is carrying a lavender handkerchief soaked in brandy and probably wouldn't notice if you were on fire. Still, you casually adjust the veil over your right curl, the one hiding the sugared grape clusters. Just in case. The scene around you is a living gallery of absurd opulence. A young debutante with a tower of ringlets has somehow perched a small, papier-mâché deer atop her head, which twitches suspiciously every time she laughs. You suspect there's licorice up there. Probably ribboned. In a corner, two matrons gossip, their wigs nearly touching the chandeliers. One gestures wildly with her fan, and you spot it, a glint of silver wrapper peeking through the edge of her hair. Chocolate. Imported. Scandalously modern. You start to notice the signs now. The subtle hair fidget. The careful lean. The faint scent of clove or vanilla. The slight hesitation before a yawn. Ah yes, she's biting into something behind that rose plume. You're among the snack elite, and you didn't even need an invitation. But not everyone is amused. A stern gentleman near the fireplace grumbles about frivolity and the degradation of noble fashion. His own wig is conservative, neat, powdered to a chalky grey. No snacks in there unless you count bitterness. You smile politely as you float past, then check your reflection in a nearby mirror to make sure your sugar cluster hasn't slipped. Still intact. Still fabulous. What's truly remarkable is how well all this is working. No snacks are visible. No wrappers rustling. Just you, holding court with elegance and a subtle crunch hidden beneath your feathers. Of course, every trend has its growing pains. A young lady once attempted to sneak an entire custard tart into the structure of her hair and passed out during a midsummer garden party. The cream had turned, the bees had noticed, and by the time someone fetched the smelling salts, she was covered in sugar ants. Nobody talked about it directly, but a certain circle of women began whispering, "Mind your pastry proportions," in drawing rooms across Mayfair. It's a learning curve, like all fashion. One must balance daring with discretion, elegance with edibility. The trick, as you've now discovered, lies in the placement. High and central causes heat build-up. Too low, and you risk a back-of-neck goo disaster. Side curls are ideal, ventilated, shielded, and just a whisper away from your mouth if needed. You lean gently against a cushioned bench, sighing as you pretend to admire a portrait. Your jaw twitches. One small move and yes, you nibble a candied nut from the edge of your curls. Perfectly preserved. No one sees. No one suspects. You're a genius. And just like that, the evening continues, lace fluttering, powdered laughter rising like meringue, and you? Floating through the aristocracy with your secret stash humming like a lullaby in your hair. You wake up the next morning with a stiff neck, a slight sugar hangover, and a vague memory of someone complimenting your aromatic aura at the card table. That was probably the fig glaze escaping your back braid, but no matter. Reputation intact. Wig. Slightly askew. Snacks. All accounted for except for one rogue almond cluster that has vanished into the abyss. You choose not to think about where it ended up. The maid enters, her eyes scanning the disaster atop your head with the weariness of someone who's seen too much. She sighs, then begins the daily ritual: unpin, unroll, deconstruct. Every layer of your wig is like an archaeological dig through last night's triumphs and questionable decisions. Out falls a hairpin, a lavender sprig, a crushed candied violet, and finally, a paper-thin wafer that somehow retained its shape and crispness, a miracle. This is how the great snack smuggling began, slowly, subtly, and always with a trace of sugar dust. It wasn't some grand trend, launched with fanfare and silk-lined invitations. No. It started with a few clever women, tired of nibbling dry toast before a 5-hour evening engagement. Women who asked, "Why shouldn't I bring a sweet with me? And if I must carry it, where better than in the one accessory guaranteed to follow me everywhere?" It helped, of course, that Georgian wigs were basically edible dollhouses. Their hollow centers, stiffened with wires and pins, created perfect little chambers, dark, stable, and just the right temperature for a slice of fruit leather or a wrapped caramel. One lady reportedly used a miniature pasteboard drawer system in her wig space, allowing for snack selection by mood. Fancy a praline? Left compartment. Prefer a licorice twist? Right curl, third pin down. Was this practical? No. Was it hygienic? Let's not lie to ourselves. But was it fabulous? Undeniably. And it caught on. You hear the whispers at tea. Lady Eustacia is said to keep candied orange peels behind her ostrich plume. The Marchioness of Bellington apparently lined her wig with spun sugar floss for a winter ball. It melted under the chandeliers and turned into a sticky halo. Messy, but ethereal. Even the magazines of the day began printing coy hints. One fashion column notes that the modern coiffure must strike a balance between loft and lightness, lest a lady's teat topple under the burden of both decoration and indulgence. That's a polite way of saying, don't overload your hair with tarts, madam. Of course, no self-respecting woman admitted to it. When asked directly, you'd smile and say, "Oh heavens, no," as if the very idea of an edible accent made you faint. But among friends, you swapped recipes for honeyed walnuts that wouldn't stick to lace. You compared ribbon tucks that could double as sugar packet holders. You whispered about bees. Because bees were a hazard. They didn't care about elegance. If your hair smelled like a patisserie, they would find you. There's an apocryphal tale about a lady whose wig, stuffed with sugared dates, became the temporary home of 2 honeybees during a countryside fete. She calmly excused herself, sipped a cordial, and waited for the buzzing to stop. It never did. Her wig was later found in a hedge. The bees had claimed it. Historians still argue whether this was an exaggerated fable to discourage snack hair or whether it really happened, and the lady simply shrugged and ordered another, less insect-prone wig. Some embraced the challenge. Lady Honoria Thimbleton commissioned a special hairpiece lined with tiny mesh screens to protect her hidden bonbons. It worked, mostly. Except once, when a moth got in during a garden stroll and chewed a hole straight through the back seam, leaving a trail of cocoa dust behind her like a tragic fairy. But still, the appeal grew. Food was expensive, after all. Sweets were luxury items. And nothing screamed opulence quite like casually producing one mid-conversation. Picture it, your rival is droning on about her embroidery sampler, and you delicately, without breaking eye contact, tilt your head and extract a sugared cherry from your curls. You don't even eat it. You just hold it between 2 fingers. Power. Servants, of course, were the unsung architects of this silent revolution. Wig makers began adjusting styles, extra padding here, more netting there, to accommodate their mistresses' edible demands. Maids became experts in food placement, learning to wedge treats in spots that wouldn't interfere with posture or risk public dislodgement. One maid, recorded in a letter as Prudence F., was said to have invented a technique using waxed parchment pockets sewn directly into the base curls. She eventually married the wigmaker's apprentice and opened a small boutique offering custom discreet coiffures for the nobility. She retired comfortably in Kent. Not everyone was pleased with this trend. Medical pamphlets warned of poisonous hair conditions caused by sugary fumes and moral decline via gluttony in disguise. Satirists had a field day. One print titled The Bouffon Buffet showed a woman being pecked by birds while trying to eat a pastry from her own hair. Another, more risque, featured a lady lifting her wig to reveal an entire roast pigeon. That one was less plausible, but you admire the spirit. Still, snack hair endured. Even as powdered styles began to evolve, women found new ways to integrate food into fashion. Edible jewelry became a thing. Perfumed sugar dust replaced hair powder in some daring circles. And a group of avant-garde wig enthusiasts in Paris tried to create edible wigs entirely made of spun sugar and nougat. They lasted approximately 20 minutes. But for 20 glorious, sticky minutes, they were the future. You sit in your boudoir now, gazing at your reflection. Your wig lies on the stand, half deconstructed, faintly fragrant. You know tonight's party will be long, and the canapés unreliable. So, you consider your options. You reach into a drawer and withdraw a single, rose-scented biscuit, delicate, soft, and beautifully wrapped. You smile. Time to get creative. Tonight, the invitation says masked salon, which means elaborate costumes, feathered wigs, and a heavy emphasis on pretending not to recognize the person you gossiped about just yesterday. You've chosen a powder blue satin gown with a cascading bustle and a matching ribbon for your hairpiece. But more importantly, you've chosen snacks. Your maid, long resigned to the edible additions, lays them out like a jeweler: candied rose petals, thin wafers wrapped in vellum, and your pièce de résistance, a miniature sugar-crusted pear. She gently fans out the wig, fluffing the curled edges, and you both examine the available compartments. You've done this enough to know, placement is everything. The side curls can hold the petals. The nape, cooler and more stable, gets the pear. The wafers slide into a narrow slit lined with embroidered silk. The whole thing smells like a bakery that secretly moonlights as a perfumery. Tonight's goal: elegance with a touch of indulgence. And secrecy, always. No one likes a show-off. The art of wig snacking lies in suggestion. A hint of sweetness in the air. A suspiciously satisfied smile. The salon itself is chaos in velvet. Giggling ladies in powdered masks, men in satin breeches making flamboyant bows, and an orchestra in the corner already launching into a minuet. As you enter, heads turn. Your wig is on the modest side, just under a foot high, but impeccably constructed. And unlike those tottering monstrosities stuffed with ribbons and plastic birds, yours is whispering something quieter. I smell amazing. I might contain a treat. You'll never know. A woman in green spots you and waves her fan like a semaphore. You float over, dodging two gentlemen arguing about classical poetry and cologne. As she leans in to greet you, you catch the faintest scent of clove and orange peel. You raise an eyebrow. Spiced plum, she whispers, adjusting the silk flower pinned behind her left ear. You smile. The game is on. This is the world of edible wig diplomacy. Friendships form around flavor. Rivalries spark over who snuck in a more exotic treat. At one gathering last month, a woman stunned the crowd by revealing a cluster of Turkish delight laced with cardamom hidden in her side poof. She didn't eat it. Just hinted. It was enough. Tonight, someone's brought sugared ginger, a rare and bold choice. There's a quiet ripple of appreciation when she passes. Another woman, probably new to the scene, attempts to extract a peppermint from the top of her wig mid-conversation. It falls, rolls, and disappears under a table. Everyone pretends not to notice, But the damage is done. Rookie move. You, of course, are a professional. Your moment arrives near midnight. The room is warm, laughter echoing, and your stomach growling just slightly. You shift your weight, tilt your head, and with a subtle flick of your wrist, unhook the silk loop near your temple. A rose petal drops into your palm. You press it to your lips as if dabbing sweat. Melted sugar, perfumed and delicate, dissolves on your tongue. A woman across the room locks eyes with you. She knows. You know she knows. You both nod, regal and complicit. Mainstream history may tell you about powdered wigs as a symbol of social class, hygiene, or lack thereof, or baroque excess. But here, in this sweet-smelling bubble of indulgence, wigs become something more, a quiet act of rebellion. You're not just surviving an endless social calendar. You're smuggling pleasure into a world obsessed with appearances. The treats vary. Marzipan animals are popular, compact, durable, and cute enough to pass as decoration. Sugar-glazed nuts are a staple, beloved for their resilience. Dried fruits, especially dates and apricots, are favored by the truly strategic, chewy, slow-burning, and less prone to stick to lace. One particularly inventive duchess once attended a winter ball with a wig containing a full miniature gingerbread scene. Trees. A sugar deer. Even a fondant cottage with a licorice roof. No one dared question her. Partly out of awe. Mostly because the whole thing smelled like heaven, and standing near her was more rewarding than dancing. Of course, you've had your disasters. Who hasn't? The time you tried to sneak a caramel twirl into the base curl and it melted halfway through a waltz. Legendary. There's a painting of that evening somewhere in your uncle's estate, and if you look closely, you can see the sticky shadow trailing down the back of your gown. Historians still debate whether such extravagance was seen as a sign of decadence or simply part of the broader culture of sensory indulgence that defined the Georgian elite. Some argue the edible wig was a quiet protest, a way to reclaim personal agency in a world of rigid etiquette. Others claim it was just hungry people doing what hungry people do. Either way, it became an art form. You continue your circuit of the room, offering mild compliments, dodging overly perfumed suitors, and occasionally inhaling a whiff of someone else's cinnamon bun situation. One lady leans in to murmur a secret, and a shard of sugar crust flutters from her hair. She steps on it and carries on. The room grows louder. Music swells. A man in a fox mask tries to flirt with you using a sonnet, and you pretend to swoon just long enough to sneak another wafer. You're a master now. A sugar-coated ninja. Later, as the evening ends, and the guests gather for final dances, you find yourself in a corner by a candelabra, wig still high, posture still perfect, and a smile blooming on your lips. You could go for something savory, actually. A parmesan crisp, perhaps. That's tomorrow's experiment. But for now, your head is light, your secret's intact, and the rose petal's memory lingers on your tongue. It's a Wednesday afternoon, and you're in a chaise lounge pretending to read a French novel, mostly to avoid being roped into embroidery by Lady Trenholm. She's in the next room stabbing a handkerchief with a needle and calling it art. You, however, are far too occupied. Because tonight is the event of the month, the Marchioness of Daleforth's famous soiree. Known for extravagant displays, questionable poetry recitations, and her signature whipped syllabub towers served in antique teacups, this party is where reputations are made, alliances formed, and most importantly, where snack-in-wig culture reaches its full ridiculous, sugar-dusted glory. You're not the only one prepping. Across town, maids are starching plumes. Wig makers are wiring secret compartments. Pastry cooks are carving sugared fruits into improbable shapes. The Marchioness's salons are rumored to feature edible decor tonight, and if the rumors are true, people will be trying to one-up the wallpaper. Which means you need to level up. The usual marzipan and rose petals won't cut it. Your maid, sensing your ambition, presents a radical idea. What about stuffed almonds in the curls, and candied lemon peel twisted into the side coils like ribbons? Genius. You spend an hour experimenting. The almonds go in easily, thanks to a clever netting trick. The lemon peel? Trickier. But with enough pins and a prayer to Saint Honoré, patron saint of bakers and possibly wigs by extension, it holds. By early evening, your head is a fragrant, edible crown. A whisper of lemon. A hint of almond oil. From a distance, you simply smell expensive. The coach rattles over cobblestones as you approach the Daleforth estate. The house looms, windows glowing with candlelight, the faint sound of violins drifting out like something from a dream. The footman opens your carriage door, and you step down slowly, perfectly balanced. You hear a soft clink, one of the almonds shifted, but nothing falls. You've got this. Inside, it's a cathedral of absurd luxury. Gilded mirrors. Hanging gardens. An ice sculpture of a swan with a real wig, powdered and perched on its icy head. It's melting fast, but no one cares, it's art. You make your entrance just as the first recitation begins. Some lord with impressive sideburns is halfway through a sonnet about moonlight and sheep. Everyone claps politely while silently scanning the room for wine and gossip. And then, the moment you've been waiting for. Lady Archwell arrives wearing a wig shaped like a small gondola. Inside the gondola, tiny sugared grapes strung on hairpins like passengers. One man audibly gasps. The room pivots. People drift toward her like sugared moths. You don't panic. This isn't a competition. It absolutely is. With graceful ease, you glide into her orbit. Compliments are exchanged. She smiles tightly, her grapes slightly sagging from the heat. You lean in, just enough for your lemon peels to catch the light. Oh my, someone says. Do I smell citrus? You smile, demure and deadly. A hint. The salon begins to buzz. Women flit by with increasingly elaborate styles. One sports spun sugarbirds nested in powdered curls. Another has lavender shortbread embedded in ringlets. A particularly daring debutante tries to hide an entire miniature fruit tart. It slides. She gasps. It's saved, barely, by a quick-thinking fan snap. You know this world now. The glance that lingers just a moment too long on a suspiciously symmetrical bun. The half-smile exchanged when someone adjusts a hairpiece and a faint sugar flake falls. The exaggerated denial, oh, this? Just a flower, spoken while clearly chewing something apricot adjacent. And the parties are designed for it. Salons were once places of wit and discourse, but in this era, they've become stages for edible theatre. Hostesses know to keep real food light because, let's face it, everyone's already snacking on their own supply. One older gentleman, clearly new to the scene, eyes your hair and leans in conspiratorially. Forgive me, but, is that a biscuit? You give him a look so icy he nearly apologizes in Latin. Sir, you say. It's a coiffure. But he's right. It is a biscuit, carefully sliced into a crescent and disguised as part of your ribbon braid. Still firm. Still fragrant. Still uneaten. Historians still argue whether these salon games were known only within upper aristocratic circles or whether they trickled into the aspirational middle classes. Some believe it was purely a noblewoman's folly, hidden behind veils of discretion. Others argue that merchant wives, eager to imitate the elite, engaged in similar snack hair experiments on smaller scales, think sugar cubes and candied nuts rather than exotic jellies and imported fruits. Regardless, salons like these became quiet battlegrounds. Not for political ideas or philosophical debates, those had their time, but for dominance in dessert display. It was a performance. A dance. A delicious, powdered arms race. Of course, there were limits. At one infamous gathering, a woman arrived with a wig shaped like a beehive. Literal beehive. Constructed with caramel threads and dotted with candied bees. It collapsed during the third dance. The cleanup required hot water, 3 footmen, and a dog named Jeremy. People still talk about it, usually with nervous laughter and shuddering. But tonight, you are flawless. The lemon peels glisten. The almonds are perfectly hidden. And as you sip your wined cranberry, sharp, you feel the slight tug of a candid twist behind your ear. You slip it free and take a tiny bite. Crisp. Sweet. Still cool. You're not just attending the party. You are the party. There's something uniquely terrifying about sneezing while wearing a wig that contains dessert. Especially when you're standing 3 feet from the Queen's lady-in-waiting. Your nose twitches. The powdered starch tickles your sinuses. You try to stifle it, ladylike, polite, but it's no use. You let out a delicate chew, and instantly feel a shift. Not in your soul, but in your curls. Something just moved. You freeze. The room does not. Conversations continue like orchestrated birdsong. A baritone voice near the harpsichord begins a sonnet recital about melancholy sheep. A group of ladies in lilac giggle into their fans. A footman discreetly adjusts the candelabra angle. And you reach up casually, of course, and feel it. The candid pair. It's slipping. You were warned. Your maid had narrowed her eyes and said, "That's a lot of glaze for a side bun." But it matched your gown, and besides, who doesn't love a risk? Well, you now. Across the salon, the Queen's lady-in-waiting, a woman known as much for her silence as her ability to detect gossip from 50 paces, turns slightly, her powdered brows arching ever so slightly as she scans the room. She has sensed the drama. You tilt your head, hoping gravity is on your side, and pivot toward a velvet curtain. Just in case. But alas, you are not alone. Lord Ashbrook, a man whose entire personality is velvet waistcoats and unsolicited limericks, chooses this exact moment to approach. "My lady," he purrs, "your wig looks positively delicious tonight." Your blood runs cold. Does he know? Or is he just being weird again? You smile politely. "I suppose that's a compliment." "Oh, entirely." He grins, revealing teeth too white for someone who lives on sherry and gossip. "It's simply radiant." That's not radiant he's seeing. That's pear syrup. It's oozing. Historians still argue whether this was the exact incident that gave rise to the glazed debacle of 1777, an incident referenced in several anonymous journals and at least one scandalous poem. Some believe it was embellished over time, growing more outrageous with each retelling. Others insist it truly happened, down to the crimson drapery and the sticky trail of fruit pulp. But you know the truth. Because it's happening now. You excuse yourself from Lord Ashbrook midverse, his halfway through a rhyme with temptress and breakfast, and drift toward a shadowed corner. You tilt your head forward, reach into the back coils, and catch it. The pear, still mostly intact, slightly warm, and now very sticky, sits in your hand like an elegant grenade. You panic. There's no discreet way to eat it. There's no trash bin in Georgian society. There is only one solution. You find a passing servant, a teenager with eyes too wide and a future in damage control, and you palm him the pear with a whispered, "Do not ask." He bows, deeply confused, and disappears into the servants' corridor. Possibly to eat it. Possibly to preserve it for future blackmail. You breathe. Disaster averted. Barely. But the night is not over. No. Because now you must repair the look. The absence of the pear has left a visible gap in your side bun, an empty space in what was a perfectly balanced coiffure. And in Georgian fashion, asymmetry is basically public nudity. You scan the room. A few fans. Feathers. Ribbons. Then you spot her, Lady Estelle Marshwith, drinking a cordial with one hand, adjusting a violet ribbon in her wig with the other. And on her shoulder, a spare silk bloom. You approach. Exchange the usual pleasantries. Mention a fictional cousin. Laugh at a joke you don't hear. Then, timing perfect, you compliment her gloves, and gently, gracefully, pluck the spare bloom from her shoulder as if brushing away a speck of lint. She barely notices. You slide it into your wig. Voila. Balance restored. Crisis. Completely averted. Of course, these mishaps aren't rare. The more elaborate the hairstyle, the more likely something will go rogue. One lady's sugared cherries melted during a midsummer masquerade, dripping pink syrup down her temples. Another's honey-glazed nut cluster fell during a beau, landed in a punch bowl, and was accidentally eaten by the Bishop of Gloucester. He didn't complain, but he did blink in confusion for a full minute. Even the Queen wasn't immune. Court gossip whispers of an incident in which one of her attendants fainted mid-dance, and the culprit turned out to be a collapsed wig filled with licorice and pear drops. The weight had simply become too much. A cautionary tale, passed down like family silver. That's the price of edible elegance. And yet, you don't stop. Because the stakes are too high, the glamour too intoxicating. That first moment, when someone leans in and says, "Is that cinnamon I smell?" That coy tilt of the head, the flutter of a fan, the conspiratorial grin, it's worth it. All of it. There are those who sneer. Food in the hair. How vulgar. But they wear plain powdered wigs with no flair, no risk, no flavor. They will never know the satisfaction of sneaking a sugared violet mid-conversation or the thrill of concealing a walnut cluster in a silk bow. And tonight, despite the near-pair catastrophe, you are still triumphant. The lady-in-waiting never speaks to you directly, but as she passes, she looks at your wig, then at your eyes. There's the faintest quirk of her lips. Not a smile. Something more dangerous. Recognition. She knows. You know she knows. She knows you know she knows. And yet, neither of you says a word. It's not scandal if it's silent. It's just fashion. The candles burn low. The guests thin out. One woman dozes off on a velvet settee, her wig lopsided, and wait, is that a jelly bean? No. Just a pearl pin. You're seeing things now. The night ends with gentle music and distant laughter. You step into your carriage, head aching, curls loosening, but spirits high. Tomorrow, there will be rumors. There always are. But for now, you rest your head against the velvet cushion, feeling a tiny crunch. Oh, the missing almond. Welcome back. Your maid has seen things. Unspeakable things. She's cleaned sticky lemons out of silk lace. She's unwound crushed ginger snaps from tight back curls. Once, she found an entire dried fig wedged beneath a wax bloom and just sighed before extracting it like an unexploded bomb. Today, she doesn't even flinch when you hold up a tiny cheese wafer and ask, "Do you think this can survive a 3-hour carriage ride and a candlelit supper?" She inspects it the way a jeweler inspects a flawed diamond. If we reinforce the right side netting and use the tight braid beneath the plume, maybe. But it'll be your scalp that suffers. Fair. You agree, and she gets to work, her hands a blur of pins, ribbons, and silent judgment. You sometimes wonder what she really thinks. Does she find this snack smuggling hilarious? Tragic? Impressive? You've caught her muttering to herself while threading almonds into a wig's back twist. Noble, she says. More like nutty. But she never refuses. Because in the world below the powdered curls, in the realm of those who do the pinning, dusting, perfuming, and decrumbling, they are the architects of this edible trend. And they know it. Behind every candy-filled wig is a servant who's had to repowder after a sugar spill. Who's ironed a ribbon coated in honey. who soothed a noblewoman's tears after a chocolate truffle melted down her temple mid-fox hunt. They are the wig whisperers. And their stories rarely make the paintings. Downstairs in the servants' quarters, the gossip is thicker than hair pomade. The butler says Lady Trenforth tried to stash a meat pie in her curls warm. It bled into the linen, and the wigmaker walked out in protest. Cook says the Duke's cousin keeps jerky in his queue. She calls it hair jerky, and cackles until she snorts. Your own maid, Ruth, is considered an innovator among the help. They say she once built a 3-layer snack chamber into a French twist using only horsehair, patience, and a bone needle. No one knows what she was paid, but she hasn't washed her own linens since. Sometimes you catch her practicing new designs after hours. You watched once, she didn't see you, carefully sewing a ribbon pocket into a training wig. She tucked a small biscuit into it. Smiled. It's an art form, and like all great artists, Ruth seeks perfection. Do you ever think it's absurd? You ask her, as she slides the wafer into place and powders the seam. All of it is absurd, miss, she says. That's why it works. The truth is, without the help of your maid and your wig maker, none of this edible elegance would be possible. The wigs are too complicated, too sensitive, too heavy, in every way. They add secret hooks and stiffening pads. They invent lace guards and tuck wax paper liners under curls to prevent sugar from seeping through. They test on themselves how long a candid nut can stay viable under lamp heat. They time it. They chart melting points. They are engineers, chemists, artists, saints, and sometimes saboteurs. You've heard the stories. One noblewoman had a falling out with her maid and arrived at a ball with what she thought was a hidden candy cluster. It was actually preserved garlic cloves. The scent cleared half the parlor. Another woman, rude to her wig maker, found that her supposedly sleek wig had been built just slightly off-center. Nothing disastrous. Just enough to make every painting of her look vaguely crooked. Historians still debate how much control servants had over wig construction and whether these little revenges were widespread or whispered legends. But judging by Ruth's slow, satisfied smirk when she tightens a pin just a little too hard after you call her inventive, you suspect the power dynamic is more complicated than it seems. There's a quiet pride in her work. A glint in her eye when someone compliments your impossibly balanced curls. She nods slightly from the corner. No one notices but you. And sometimes, she tests the boundaries. Once, as a joke, she placed a single sugar-dusted pecan directly on top of your wig, disguised beneath a velvet bow. Not tucked inside. Not hidden. On top. You didn't notice until halfway through the evening, when a gentleman complimented your charming crown. Ruth pretended to be shocked. "Oh, miss, I must have dropped it while powdering." Liar. But it worked. No scandal. Just a new trend, the garnished wig. Within weeks, half the duchesses in London were wearing edible accessories right out in the open. Sugar roses. Lemon ribbons. Someone even tried a macaron fascinator. It didn't survive a sneeze, but it made an impression. There's always a push-pull between the mistresses and the makers. You dream up the fantasy. They make it functional. You demand the impossible. They make it wearable, barely. But more than that, they're part of the game. Just as you lean in with sugared secrets and delicately timed nibbles, they're pulling strings below stairs, testing, innovating, adjusting. One evening, Ruth confides that she's developing a winterproof sugar frame. Something that resists melting even under direct firelight. She's tested it with boiled sugar, dried fruits, and powdered sugar blends. "It's the air," she mutters, poking at a half-finished wig on her work table. The curls trap heat near the scalp. Got to find a cooler curl structure. Maybe more vents. Vents, you ask. She looks at you. You want a pastry crown that doesn't melt, don't you? You do. Of course you do. So you nod, and she nods back, the silent agreement between dreamer and door. Your fate and your snacks are in her hands. Later that week, at a dinner hosted by Lord Northbridge, you overhear a rival sigh and mutter, "Why does her hair always smell like a cake shop in Paris?" You smile. Because it does. And somewhere downstairs, Ruth probably heard it too. You step outside onto the marble terrace, where a light breeze tousles your curls, but not too much, thanks to 4 discreet anchor pins and a prayer. The scent of jasmine floats through the air, mingling with the ever-present whiff of wig powder and baked apples. Somewhere, a harpsichord hums politely in the background. Now imagine navigating this moment with 3 candied chestnuts, a licorice twist, and half a nougat square tucked inside your hairstyle. You do it like a pro. Because you're not just a lady of fashion, you're a mobile snack cart with etiquette training. And tonight, it's not just a garden stroll. There's a waltz in the ballroom, a lantern-lit promenade across the grounds, and a ceremonial toast involving real fireworks. You'll need every ounce of sugar-fueled stamina your wig pantry can offer. Out here in the wild, that is, outside the drawing rooms and salons where delicate nibbles can be consumed mid-conversation, your wig snacks become survival tools. Hidden sustenance in a world of endless social ritual. And let's be honest, some of these rituals go on. Take fox hunting, for instance. Yes, some ladies rode. And yes, some of them still wore wigs while doing it. Try keeping pace with a galloping gelding while preserving the integrity of your almond clusters. It's not for the faint of scalp. Historians still argue whether one particularly daring duchess truly tucked beef jerky into her back braid for long hunts, or whether that's just an embellished stable tale. But the idea caught on. Soon, ladies were fashioning low-slung riding wigs with little snack pouches built in, some even lined with waxed fabric. A precursor to the modern stole bag? Possibly. But much stickier. Balls were even more treacherous. The air inside those crowded ballrooms grew thick equal parts sweat, tallow candles, and crushed flowers. You'd twirl, curtsy, and glide, all while maintaining your delicate coiffure and praying the marzipan petals didn't melt into a sugary scalp soup. You remember one unfortunate evening at the Bramblehurst Winter Ball, when Lady Eleanor attempted a dramatic spin during a country dance. The centrifugal force sent 3 candied plums flying into the crowd. One bounced into a gentleman's glass of ratafia. He sipped it anyway, then tipped his hat in approval. Sometimes, the mishaps become legend. There's the time your own confection, an exquisitely hidden blackberry tartlet, began to sag mid-gavotte. You slipped behind a potted palm, trying to make a few emergency adjustments, only to find a fellow guest crouched there already, frantically biting off what appeared to be a chocolate ribbon from her own hairstyle. You locked eyes. She swallowed. You nodded. Nothing was said. That's the code of the wild wig eaters. Outdoors, there's a different kind of challenge: wind. The slightest gust can flutter silk boughs and shake loose finely powdered sugar. You've learned the hard way. Once, at a spring fete, your candied mint leaves became confetti across the lawn. Children chased them, thinking they were real leaves. One boy tried to eat a bee by mistake. You never forgot. To combat nature's mood swings, wig makers started incorporating wind-resistant structures. Extra stays. Heavier powders. Even discreet wax coatings to keep edibles in place. These designs weren't just ornate, they were aerodynamic. One particularly avant-garde innovation was the garden loop, a hidden silk pocket looped into the base of a high wig, secured with invisible pins, meant to hold one delicate biscuit or a rolled wafer. Easy access, minimal melt. Ruth once made you a triple loop version. You nearly wept with gratitude. On stormy evenings, however, not even the cleverest maid can outwit humidity. Moisture is the eternal enemy of sugar. You recall the infamous summer fete of 1780, when a heatwave caused 6 ladies' wigs to droop like melting sculptures. Edible elements slid downward like sad, sticky tears. A chocolate-dipped rosebud hit someone's lap and left a mark the size of Wales. One resourceful baroness, however, had lined her entire wig with lavender sachets. The dried herbs absorbed some of the sweat and sugar fallout and left her smelling like a pastoral poem. Not edible, but certainly aromatic. Of course, every outing brings new risks. Like horses, their curiosity knows no bounds. You learned this when a particularly nosy gelding sniffed your curls, then attempted to nibble a ribbon that, in fairness, did smell like molasses. You escaped unscathed, but the ribbon did not. Historians sometimes scoff at these stories. Surely ladies weren't really riding or promenading with snacks in their wigs, they say. But they weren't there. They didn't see the look in Lady Wellesley's eye when she reached into her curls during a fireworks display and popped a sugared nut into her mouth, cool as a cucumber. And they certainly never witnessed the chaos of the candlelight midnight waltz at the Duke's estate, when sparks from an overly enthusiastic Roman candle drifted downward and ignited the sugar veil atop Lady Gertrude's wig. It fizzled, caramelized slightly, and was extinguished by 3 fans and a brandy-soaked napkin. She was fine. Her pride was not. But that's the thing about life in the wild with a snack wig. You will lose a treat or two. You will get odd looks when someone smells cinnamon and can't find the source. And yes, once in a while, a passing dog might follow you for 20 minutes because it thinks your hair is dinner. You embrace it. It's part of the charm. Because there's something unspeakably satisfying about strolling through moonlit gardens, the soft rustle of your silk gown keeping time with your footsteps, and knowing that at any moment you could reach into your elaborate hairdo and retrieve a perfect sugar-coated violet. It's elegance. It's rebellion. It's snacks. And it's yours. You're sitting very still. Not out of grace or social restraint, but because the tiny pastry swan tucked just behind your left ear is threatening to slide free. And if it falls, it might hit Lord Pembroke in the soup. Again. The thing is, wig snack engineering is not for amateurs. You've learned that the hard way, burnt sugar on your scalp, a melting truffle crisis during a sermon, and once, the distinct sensation of a jelly bean rolling slowly down your temple mid-curtsy. That's why you've started taking a very keen interest in the structural science behind your hair. And yes, there is science. Or at least a crumbly, powdered version of it. First, the base. Most Georgian wigs are made from human hair, horsehair, or even goat hair, if you're cheap and don't mind the faint aroma of barn. They're built on wire frames or stiffened linen caps, which are then pinned, curled, and powdered until they resemble fluffy architectural masterpieces. Wig makers, true artists with a flair for both height and volume, developed a system of hidden support loops, stitched-in pads, and something called a rat. No, not an actual rat. Though in fairness, sometimes it became one. The rat is a soft roll of hair or wool used to give structure and height to the wig. But if stored poorly, it could become home to other kinds of rats. That's why your maid, Ruth, always keeps lavender oil on hand. And a stick. Anyway, the secret to snack integration lies in weight distribution. It's not enough to just cram a butter biscuit behind a curl and hope for the best. That's how you get the dreaded wig tilt, where one side of your hair begins to sag, pulling the entire structure into a slow, humiliating lean. A lean that whispers, "There's a muffin hidden in here," and everyone knows it. Historians still argue whether wig makers deliberately created snack pockets or if it was simply something resourceful ladies and their maids invented over time. What's certain is that by the mid-1700s, wigs had evolved into full-blown engineering projects. Some even included collapsible sections, little hinged flaps hidden under silk rosettes that could lift to reveal a single sugared almond. One duchess allegedly had a clockwork fan that turned a pastry carousel inside her coiffure. She called it her dessert wheel. Your own wig today features two key innovations: an internal ribbon net for securing soft candies, and a reinforced sugar shelf near the crown, basically a flat braid platform that can bear the weight of a miniature tart without shifting. Ruth tested it with a boiled egg once. It held. But everything must be anchored. That means pins. So many pins. Ruth uses up to 60 in a single design. You've started naming them. Prickly George secures the back bun. Betsy keeps your licorice curls from unraveling. Oh my ear is the one you swear she stabs harder when she's in a mood. One of the fringe tips whispered between fashionable ladies: chill your candies first. A cold sugared nut won't melt as quickly in the heat of a ballroom. Some even stash their hair snacks in ice-lined boxes before an event, then insert them at the last moment. Of course, if you mistime it, you might arrive with frost on your curls. Still, better cold than gooey. And there's the question of fragrance. Powdered wigs are often scented lavender, rose, bergamot. But once you start tucking edible treats inside, you need to balance the aroma. Too much perfume, and your biscuits taste like soap. Too little, and you risk being identified as the source of that mysterious faint sugar rot smell drifting through the salon. That's why Ruth developed what she calls sniff mapping. She tests the airflow across your wig using a feather and candle smoke, noting where scents drift. Then she places the most fragrant snacks, like candied orange peels, in high exit zones. Less aromatic items, like plain crackers, go in the quiet curls. It's basically culinary feng shui for your head. The more ambitious ladies go further. You remember Lady Eugenia, who once tried to construct a replica of the Royal Opera House atop her wig using spun sugar columns. It took 12 hours, 5 artisans, and an emergency head brace. It lasted 30 minutes before collapsing in the humidity. She still refers to it as the Great Crumble. That said, not every experiment ends in disaster. One quietly brilliant countess invented the sugar comb, a decorative piece slid into the side of a wig that doubled as a solid toffee stick. You could subtly lick it during long sermons. No one noticed. Except the bishop, who started licking his robe tassel in solidarity. That was noticed. Of course, you've had your own victories. That time at the summer musicale, when you managed to discreetly unpin your wig's back cluster, remove a wrapped ginger lozenge, and tuck it into your mouth, all without missing a single polite nod to the music. Your reward? A small smile from Ruth, watching from the side of the room like a proud sugar ninja. But not all risks can be engineered away. There's always the rogue moment: a dance partner dips you too low, and your licorice braids shift. A curious child pulls at a suspiciously shiny rosette. Or the moment you lean too close to a candelabra and realize the wax has started to soften your sugar crown. That's why wig snack design isn't just about clever placement, it's about performance under pressure. It's your own private battle between elegance and edible chaos. And you love it. Because when it works, when everything stays in place and no one guesses that your perfect coiffure contains a lightly salted caramel cluster, it feels like victory. Like a secret only you, and maybe Ruth, understand. A secret that's delicious. Your wig smells like cake. Not metaphorically. Not like she's the life of the party. No, you literally smell like sponge cake and cinnamon sugar. And while that might sound lovely, you know what else likes that smell? Ants. And mice. And, at one terrible low point last spring, a moth with what seemed like a personal vendetta. This is the hidden side of wig snacks they don't mention at salons or during powdered tea chats, the hygiene issue. Or, let's be honest, the total lack thereof. Georgian wigs, even without the added complication of snacks, are already miniature disasters waiting to happen. You start with animal fat or pomatum, a kind of waxy, perfumed grease to mold the hair into those elaborate shapes. Then you layer on powder made of starch, sometimes wheat or rice, laced with lavender or orris root to hide the inevitable smell of day 2 wig. Or day 20. Because you don't wash your wig. That would be madness. You refresh it, repowder it, and maybe, if you're particularly ambitious, remove the inner pads or rats and beat them with a brush in the garden. So now imagine adding food. Tiny, sticky bits of sugar, crumbs, dried fruit, the occasional honey glaze. You're basically walking around with a dessert display on your head, and no refrigeration. Historians still argue whether powdered wigs were ever meant to be cleaned regularly. Some believe hairpieces were treated like hats, rotating them in and out, letting them rest between wearings. Others argue they were worn until they fell apart or attracted something with a tail. Either way, once you start stuffing your coiffure with snacks, the stakes rise fast. Ruth, ever wise, ever slightly terrifying, implements what she calls the snack sweep every other night. She removes every edible item before bed, even if it means poking through ringlets with sugar tongs. "You're not growing a bakery up there," she once muttered while fishing out a forgotten caramel that had fused itself to a support loop. She also insists on cedar oil along the inner seams of your wig. It smells lovely and deters pests. Or it used to, until one curious parakeet at Lady Winthrop's breakfast ball became strangely obsessed with your hair and had to be gently batted away with a napkin. Still, some ladies are not so careful. You've seen the results. A duchess scratching furiously at her temple during a dinner, only to excuse herself in horror as a small insect, was it an earwig, popped out from her curls. Or Lady M, always fond of treacle buns, who once left her wig unattended on a chaise during a countryside luncheon. When she returned, a trail of ants was confidently marching through the folds like they owned the place. One tale, too ghastly to verify, involves a wig left in a pantry overnight. The next morning, a chunk was missing, possibly eaten. By what? Historians won't commit, but the phrase Rat King Banquet has surfaced more than once. Of course, you do your best. You keep your sugar sealed, your biscuits pre-wrapped in lace, and your hands clean. But heat is a cruel mistress. Ballrooms are sweltering. Powder melts. Pomatum goes runny. And sugar syrup. Let's just say it has no loyalty. There was the infamous bath incident, when you tried a new look, powdered curls with candied rose petals woven in. It was elegant. Romantic. Perfect until you passed too close to the sunlit window. By the time you reached your seat, the petals had begun to melt into sticky pink streaks. You looked like a dessert that lost a knife fight. Still, cleanliness debates rage on. Some ladies insist on weekly inspections. Others argue that food-based wigs are self-sterilizing thanks to the alcohol content in their preserved fruits. It's all soaked in brandy, one claimed. The germs are dead before they start. That's a comforting thought. Less comforting, the way her wig crackled when she turned her head, like sugar hardening in real time. Servants often bear the brunt of wig hygiene. Ruth has told you horror stories, maids forced to pick through their mistresses' wigs with needles, removing hardened nougat like dentists with too much patience. Wig makers began offering cleansing combs, metal picks shaped like delicate fans, meant to scrape out food residue. They were beautiful. And largely useless. Even the royal court wasn't immune. Rumors circulated that one of Queen Charlotte's ladies wore a wig laced with vanilla-soaked ribbons for scent until the vanilla fermented and she fainted from the fumes. You're not sure it's true. But you are sure that vanilla should never bubble. And then there are the vermin precautions. You keep your wigs in hat boxes lined with lavender sachets and rose petals, but some go further. There's a tale of one viscountess who trained her cat to sit beside her wig box at all times. "She hisses at moths," she said proudly. "She's a professional." Others hire their own pest servants, boys who inspect wigs with tiny oil lamps and long needles. Their job? To catch the first signs of movement. You try not to think about it. But sometimes, in the stillness of a sleepless night, you wonder if a sugar ant has taken up residence in one of your curls. Still, you press on. Because wig snacks are worth it. Yes, there's a price, stickiness, fragility, the ever-present hum of maybe I smell like syrup. But there's also a thrill. The hush of the salon as you casually extract a dried apricot from your coiffure. The admiring glance of a fellow snacker as they spot the delicate outline of a biscuit tucked behind your jeweled comb. Cleanliness may be next to godliness, but glamour, as you've learned, lives one tier higher on the powdered peak of a pastry-stuffed masterpiece. Just, maybe check for ants first. You're not the only one with a sticky secret. It starts as a whisper at a salon. Lady Burnley claims her husband's wig smelled oddly of raisins. Someone laughs. Someone else snorts. But then it spreads. Because you're not the only one hiding food in your hair. The gentlemen are getting in on it. Now, they won't admit it. Not openly. That would be unbecoming. Undignified. Borderline scandalous. But you've seen the signs. A suspiciously stiff curl at Lord Elwick's temple. The telltale powdering motion that's just a bit too careful around the ear. And of course, the giveaway, a single sugared pistachio rolling across the ballroom floor during a bow. It's happening. It all begins, historians believe, with envy. Georgian men have always worn wigs, shorter, more practical ones called perukes or bag wigs. Trim, tidy, often tied at the back in a ribbon or clubbed with black silk. More military than confectionery. But they've watched as their wives and mistresses pulled entire sweetmeats from their hair, drawing applause and barely concealed hunger. And something inside them snapped. So the brave ones experimented. You remember the first time you saw it in person. Lord Talmadge, usually stiff as overbaked pudding, reached up, tugged on the back of his peruke, and casually produced a caramel. A whole caramel. He winked. You gasped. And then he dropped it into his tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. But this trend doesn't explode until Lord Berrington, a dandy with a flair for powdered violets and poetic nonsense, debuts his snuff and snack wig. A double-decker confection with space for both powdered tobacco and candied walnuts. It's a hit, so much so that wig makers begin discreetly offering gentlemen's compartments in their designs. Soon, it's everywhere. The clubs. The galleries. The backrooms of Parliament, where debate drags into hours and a discreet licorice root keeps you from fainting. Of course, society doesn't take this entirely in stride. There's backlash. The satirical papers go wild. One caricature shows an MP lifting his wig to reveal a cheese plate. Another depicts a duel in which both participants hurl profiteroles from their hair instead of bullets. You clip that one and keep it under your pillow. It's hilarious. And the church? Well, a sermon circulates titled Vanity and the Devil's Nougat, condemning snackwigs as a sign of moral decay. The Bishop of Gloucester refers to them as walking sugar temples of sin. You're flattered, honestly. Still, public opinion is split. Some consider male snack wigs absurd. Others, secretly charmed. There's an awkward ball in Hampshire where a nobleman's biscuit falls from his curls and lands in Lady Penelope's décolletage. She blushes. He dies inside. They marry 3 weeks later. Historians still argue whether this male wig snack fad was satire, rebellion, or just sheer hunger disguised as fashion. What's clear is that it rattles the upper crust. For centuries, men's wigs have been symbols of status and authority: lawyers, judges, powdered generals. Adding sugar to that sends mixed signals. One poor barrister, eager to follow the trend, sneaks a barley sugar into court. Mid-trial, the heat melts it. A sticky amber ribbon drips down his temple. The jury stares. The judge bangs his gavel and declares a mistrial due to unlawful confectionery interference. No one knows what happened to the sugar. You assume a clerk licked it. But even with these disasters, the movement grows. You overhear your cousin's footman discussing a duel that nearly began when two gentlemen accused each other of pilfering candied chestnuts at the opera. "I know his powder smelled like burnt honey," one allegedly hissed. And it's not just sweets. Some bold souls push boundaries further, hiding olives, smoked almonds, even thin slices of cured ham within reinforced wig folds. The Earl of Dunstable reportedly debuted a charcuterie cluster at a hunting retreat, complete with mustard paste tucked beneath his side part. The hounds loved it. The other guests were divided. There are quieter moments too. You catch your father-in-law, a stern man with a fondness for rules, discreetly pulling a peppermint from his wig during a long carriage ride. He doesn't meet your eyes. But you exchange the briefest nod, one that says, "Yes. I snack too." Ruth finds it amusing. "Men always think they're inventing something," she says, fluffing your curls. "We've been doing it for years. They just finally caught up with crumbs." But with increased participation comes logistical chaos. Male wigs aren't designed for edible payloads. Without careful padding and secure braiding, food migrates. There's a notorious evening when Lord Dunnington's almond roll slips down into his wig's ribbon bag and dislodges mid-waltz, thudding to the floor like a disgraced snack grenade. You've never seen so many people pretend they didn't notice something. Still, some men excel. Lord Grafton, meticulous and vain, commissions an entire line of confection cradles, small, rigid pouches built into his peruke's interior. He hosts salons just to show them off. "I keep lemon drops here," he purrs, tapping the left side of his head. "And here, a tiny brandy cherry. Just one. Like a secret." He smells like elegance and burnt sugar. You're both disgusted and intrigued. Eventually, a kind of truce forms. Ladies continue to lead the edible hair trend, but men carve their own path, quieter, smaller, more savory. You see it in the side-eye nods exchanged at court. The subtle tap of temple. The quiet crunch as someone dares to chew mid-ceremony. And through it all, the scandals multiply. A soldier's powdered queue falls off in battle, revealing a cluster of licorice buttons. A lord's secret wig bacon attracts a fox during a countryside walk. A poet forgets his hidden chocolates in his curls, and writes an entire sonnet with fudge on his quill. These aren't just accidents. They're stories. Legends. The era of snack wigs belongs to everyone now. It starts with a bet. Of course it does. You're at a garden fete, half listening to some duke drone on about his horse's ankles, when the air around you shifts. A crowd is gathering. Someone's shouting across the lawn. 5 guineas says she can't keep it in her wig through the whole dance. You turn. Lady Althea, never subtle, always 3 steps ahead of good sense, is grinning like a cat who's hidden something delightful in her curls. And based on the thin line of jelly glistening near her temple, you suspect that something is an éclair. You're not wrong. The next minute, Althea is twirling across the grass, powdered curls bouncing, attempting the minuet with a full pastry delicately lodged in the top tier of her wig. She succeeds. Mostly. Only a tiny splatter hits the ground. The crowd erupts. Someone hands her a lemon tart in victory. She bows, icing sliding down her forehead. It's beautiful chaos. And it's only the beginning. Because wig games, once started, become the trend. You first hear the phrase coiffure challenge at Lady Wensley's summer salon. The rules are simple. Hide a specific food in your wig, carry it through an ordeal, a dance, a walk, a dramatic reading, and reveal it intact at the end. Bonus points if you eat it. Suddenly, the salons are full of whispered dares. Keep a marzipan rabbit secure while bowing to a duchess. Smuggle a cherry tart onto the roof. Host a tea where everyone must serve snacks from their hair only. You attend one such gathering and leave with both admiration and powdered sugar in places sugar should never be. Your favorite game by far? Blind biscuit swap. 2 participants insert biscuits into identical spots in their wigs. They must then, without using hands, lean close and trade snacks. The kiss almost happens nature of the game causes more than one flustered fan flutter and at least one accidental engagement. Then there's wig whispers, a scandalous twist on broken telephone. One lady whispers a snack order into another's ear. The phrase travels from wig to wig around the circle. The last person must produce that very snack from her own hair, or the closest approximation she can manage. Hilarity ensues. Someone mistakes candied nut cluster for mustard custard. There's screaming. Even the men join in. Lord Berkeley famously challenges Viscount Rupert to the pâté duel. Each must conceal a slice of pâté on toast in their wigs, walk 10 paces, turn, and fling. Points for accuracy, presentation, and remaining dignity. Rupert's toast sticks to the side of a hedge. Berkeley's lands directly on Rupert's waistcoat. Victory declared. The scandal that follows? Spectacular. Warfare in wigs, the gossip pamphlets scream. Goose liver gone rogue. They print tiny cartoons of men with crossbows made from sugared cinnamon sticks. You cut them out and paste them in your wig drawer for inspiration. The games evolve. Soon, entire soirees are themed around edible hair play. You attend one called the Hidden Banquet, where every guest must bring a full 3-course meal concealed entirely in their wig. You eat soup from a hollowed-out bun inside Lady Spencer's crown braid. Dessert is found under Lord Heffernan's side curls, 3 strawberries and a tiny puff pastry in a silver foil wrapper. Best if consumed before midnight, he whispers, and winks. You laugh so hard you nearly drop your own wig donut. Some games get too bold. The Earl of Mortingshire attempts the hot mince slide, a mince pie balanced on a comb, slid down another's curls like a toboggan. The pie goes rogue, flies across the ballroom, and hits a bishop square in the spectacles. No one breathes. Then the bishop licks the filling off his sleeve and says, "Well aimed." Applause breaks out. Not everyone's delighted, of course. Some of the more refined set call the games low comedy, dangerous, or an insult to the dignity of Georgian fashion. But these are the same people who wear snuff-colored waistcoats and refuse to dance after dusk. You ignore them. Still, some of the caution isn't entirely unjustified. There's an incident at the Royal Botanical Conservatory where a game called Floral Fondant Find goes awry. A girl hides sugar daisies in her wig and bends too close to a hothouse orchid. The orchid, perhaps mistaking her for dessert, bites her. Or at least clamps on. The shriek echoes across the greenhouse. She's unharmed, but the orchid has to be pried off with a butter knife. It becomes a cautionary tale, always check your flora before fondant. You live for the chaos, honestly. And then, someone takes it too far. The Duchess of Ardleigh attempts the Gatto Gauntlet, 5-layer sponge, lemon curd, whipped cream, all hidden in a beehive-style wig. She makes it 3 steps into the ballroom before the heat and physics rebel. The cake collapses, sliding down her back in a slow, silent cascade. No one moves. And then the butler, bless him, announces, "Pudding is served," and the party resumes as if nothing happened. You call that moment the great turning point. Because from then on, the games embrace their absurdity. There's the muffin maze, where ladies build winding tunnels of braided hair and attempt to roll tiny pastries through them. The peach plummet, in which you balance fruit on a silk ramp and let gravity decide your fate. And your personal favorite, the Lemon Drop Lament, a tragic musical played entirely by flicking candy off wig rims in time to a harpsichord. Historians still argue whether these games were ever official, whether they were rebellions, inside jokes, or simply the human instinct to do something ridiculous with one's hair. But the records are clear. For a few sweet, chaotic years, Georgian society delighted in edible absurdity. Even now, you sometimes find yourself smirking at a particularly stable hairdo and wondering, could it hold a tart? And if it could, wouldn't it be a shame not to try? You feel it before you see it. Not a gust of wind, but a shift in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm, or when someone of rank frowns during a cotillion. There's a stillness in the salons. A new kind of silence behind the fans and powder brushes. Something's changing. And it's not just the fashions, though. Yes, those are shifting too. Wigs are ever so slightly smaller. Powder less thick. The towering hairdo once known as the dôme de dessert is now derided as common. You spot a girl brushing icing out of her curls in the corner at Lady Ashcroft's dinner, and no one even offers her a napkin. The mood is different. The cracks in the edible empire begin, oddly enough, with a goose. Specifically, Lady Whitburn's wig sculpture of a roast goose with sugared grapes. It's exquisite. Glossed, glistening, tucked into a baroque swoop of braids and ribbons. But it's also heavy. Very heavy. And halfway through the third waltz, it slides right off her head and into the governor of Bristol's lap. He screams. The goose honks. Why it honks, no one knows. There's a rumor it was taxidermied poorly and some trapped air escaped. It's all anyone talks about for weeks. The phrase goose wigged enters the gossip pages. After that, people begin to wonder, have we gone too far? You hear whispers at every event. Do you really think pickled cherries in a plait is appropriate? Lady Swan's puff pastry collapsed during the bishop's speech. Embarrassing. Someone found a half-melted nougat in the duchess's coach. The satire grows crueler. Pamphlets circulate with titles like The Crumbling Crown and Wigs of Weakness. One cartoon shows a lady lifting her curls to reveal a full buffet underneath, complete with a footman. Another shows a man with an open trapdoor on his head, pigeons flying out holding mini cheesecakes. You laugh. But it stings. And then there's the lemon incident. It happens at a royal engagement, a state dinner in honor of some very serious ambassador. A countess attempts to reveal a lemon tartlet during her toast, a cute nod to her host country, which specializes in citrus, but her wig, likely built in haste, topples sideways. The tartlet launches. It hits the ambassador in the eye. You are not invited to that country for 5 years. The Queen is not amused. After that, you notice restrictions. First, wigs must be weight appropriate. Then structurally sound. Soon, no food items larger than a plum are permitted inside Parliament wigs. Not that anyone follows that, but still it's the beginning of rules. The fun is dulling. There's a brief rally, snack smugglers try to adapt. Smaller confections. Lighter pastries. Ingenious folding fans that double as edible holders. One girl attempts a sugared almond diorama, an entire village scene with biscuit roads and gumdrop villagers in the base of her chignon. It collapses into a punch bowl. The hostess pretends not to see it. And yet, the movement isn't just dying from scandal. It's fashion itself. Styles begin shifting toward the natural. Hair left more loose, less powdered. The towering styles of the 80s seem dated, overdone. There's talk of health, of hygiene, of not using lard and honey as daily adhesives. Strange, radical talk. You hold on as long as you can. Your wig is still fortified. You sneak in one last cinnamon biscuit to a ball at Bath. But when you pull it out, flour dusting your temple, curls bouncing like cake batter, you don't hear laughter or applause. Just a long, slow sigh from the lady next to you. You nibble the edge, feel your cheeks flush, and tuck it away again. It's over. Even the wig makers give up. Tired of redesigns, tired of clients fainting under the weight of their own edible elegance. One posts a letter in his shop window. No more sugar. No more jam. I make hair, not dessert trays. You feel that in your soul. And so it fades. Quietly, anticlimactically, like powdered sugar dissolving in tea. The wig snacks are over. No more jelly jewels, no more mincemeat missteps. Just plain curls, sober colors, and the slow creep of a new aesthetic. Some say Marie Antoinette's fall sealed the trend's doom, an emblem of extravagance devoured by history. Others blame the fire at Lady Ramsden's autumn ball, where an almond croissant caught light and nearly took half the staff with it. Historians still argue whether the fall of wig snacking was inevitable, or if a little restraint might have saved it. A few defend it still, pointing to how edible hair expressed artistry, rebellion, the cleverness of hungry minds. But most call it a footnote. A frosting-filled fad lost to time. You sigh, brushing dust from your comb. There's a nostalgia in it. A sweetness. Sometimes you still find a forgotten sugar pearl in an old hairpin drawer and smile. You remember the thrill of tucking in a bonbon before a soiree. The applause. The slight, delightful absurdity of it all. That can't be replicated. Still, every now and then, when no one's looking, you twist your hair just so. Just enough space to slip in a tiny shortbread. You don't need it. But it feels right. And yet, nothing ever really dies, not in fashion, and certainly not when sugar is involved. You may have retired your edible wig years ago, brushed the last crumbs from your curls and sworn never again to pin a tart to your scalp, but if you squint, if you tilt your head just slightly toward the strange corners of the modern world, you'll see it, the ghost of the snack wig, alive and well. It first appears in a whisper. You're scrolling late at night, wrapped in your dressing gown, avoiding the dreadful task of writing thank you notes, when you stumble across a headline, "Model walks runway with licorice braids and gummy eyeliner." You blink. Scroll again. There she is, eyeshadow made of crushed candy hearts, an updo stitched with edible pearls, a tiny fondant bird perched like it belongs there. You smile. The modern edible fashion movement doesn't say it's inspired by Georgian wigs. It's more avant-garde meets high-concept dessert than sugar lumps in your hair for laughs, but the DNA is unmistakable. A Paris runway show features a ball gown spun entirely from toffee threads. Milan tries edible scarves. Tokyo goes full tilt with a hat made of sponge cake shaped like Mount Fuji. It's not practical. It's not meant to be. But it's glorious. And it doesn't stop at couture. You see echoes of wig snacking in smaller ways, too. Purses shaped like chocolate bars. Necklaces that are literal candy strings, just with better branding now. You visit a boutique in London that sells edible barrette hair clips coated in flavored sugar glaze that can be dissolved in tea once you're bored of wearing them. One influencer creates a viral video series called Hair You Can Taste. In one episode, she styles her hair into a cinnamon roll spiral and sprinkles it with faux icing sugar, just cornstarch, thankfully. Another girl does a bun buffet, 4 mini snacks hidden in 4 tightly coiled buns. Viewers vote which one to eat first. It's absurd. It's catchy. It's familiar. Because it's not just about fashion or food. It's about mischief. Whimsy. The kind of indulgent joy that lets you turn your head and say, "Want a biscuit?" And actually mean it. And let's not forget the party circuit. Themed events come back in waves, every few years. You're invited to a neo-rococo night where wigs are encouraged and edible elements are rewarded. There's a prize for best concealed confection. You win 3rd place with a licorice-laced braid, though the winner, a girl with meringue earrings, definitely had structural help. There's even a nod to the old jelly éclair duel. 2 performance artists, both wearing colossal pastel wigs, face off on stage. Each pulls a cupcake from their coiffure, throws it with a flourish, and then takes a synchronized bite from a third hidden in their sleeves. The crowd roars. You hear someone behind you whisper, "This must be how it felt back then." It is. Kind of. The nostalgia loops back into pop culture. You spot a children's book with a character named Lady Snackarella who stores cookies in her curls. A video game features a dessert duchess boss level, defeat her, and your character gains wig storage capacity +3. There's even a museum exhibit in Bath titled From Powder to Pastry, Edible Fashion Through the Ages. You go twice. And of course, social media has its own love affair with edible style. Hashtags like #wigsnacks and #eatyourlook trend every spring. There's a viral tutorial on how to braid a Twizzler into your updo. Another teaches mini cheesecake pin curls. It's all very playful. Very chaotic. Very you. But not everyone is amused. There's backlash, naturally. Some critics scoff, calling it wasteful or frivolous. We've learned nothing, they say. Back to hiding food in hair like it's 1785. A few brands try to repackage it as sustainable wearables, missing the point entirely. Still, the echo remains. Because the point was never to be serious. The point was never about fashion or food. It was about freedom. About standing at the edge of the absurd and diving in head first, curls and crumbs and all. Historians still argue whether modern edible fashion is a revival or a reinvention. Some claim it's disconnected, a parallel evolution with no real ties to Georgian snack wigs. Others say it's an inevitable cycle, that whenever humans get too neat, too stiff, too powdered, someone will come along and stick a cookie in their hair just to see what happens. You know which side you're on. You may not wear your old wigs anymore, though you did keep the tall one with the secret drawer, but the spirit of it lives in your mirror. In your pantry. In your sense of humor. And every now and then, when you catch a glimpse of yourself with a hair clip that looks suspiciously like a chocolate, you remember, it started with a dare. A wink. A single daring pastry, tucked behind the ear of history. And it never really left. Time is a strange thing, isn't it? You sit with it now, surrounded by soft light, maybe the ticking of a clock or the subtle whoosh of a fan. The world outside has calmed, and here you are one last time, thinking about powdered hair and sugared secrets. It's quiet in your dressing room. A faint scent of lavender clings to an old bonnet box in the corner. Inside, nestled among pressed lace and a ribbon from a ball you barely remember, rests the final relic, a single hair comb dusted in icing sugar residue. You touch it gently. The weight of memory is lighter than marzipan. You think back to that first time, the sheer thrill of slipping a candied almond into a freshly built bouffant, laughing with your maid about how it might melt if you danced too hard. It was never about practicality. It was about daring to be ridiculous. Daring to delight. Now you drift through the fragments of it all. The woman who smuggled a jelly tart into a duel. The lady-in-waiting whose wig leaked syrup during morning court. The scandals, the sugar highs, the soft betrayals when pastry met gravity. And still, you loved it. You always loved it. The legacy of wig snacking isn't etched in marble, of course. No great monuments, no epic poems. Just whispers in museum exhibits, cheeky nods on runways, and giggles in group chats when someone hides a mini Snickers in their scrunchie. Historians still debate what it all meant. Was it rebellion in ruffles? Hunger dressed as humor? Or simply the logical next step for a world already drunk on excess? Maybe it doesn't matter. Because you were there. You wore it. You lived it. You had powdered curls and pralines behind your ear. You were part of a fashion so bizarre, so unnecessary, so delightful, that it still lingers, sweet and strange, like sugar on the tongue. And now you let it rest. Your wig is on its stand. Your hands are clean. But inside you, somewhere behind your everyday smile, Somewhere under your modern hair, there's still a little space reserved. A hollow. Just big enough for a snack. So now, as the night deepens and the last echoes of powdered footsteps fade, you can let the images dissolve gently, soft curls stacked like pastry, whispered jokes passed between fans, the faint scent of rosewater and warm vanilla rising like memory from a satin pillow. There's no need to hold on to them. They're tucked safely away now, folded like lace, sweetened by time. You did well tonight, yes, you, time traveler of the strange and powdered past. You followed every twist, every crumbling tart, every absurd twist of sugar-laced imagination. You made it to the end, smiling through jelly jewels and wigged whispers. Now it's time to let go. Breathe in, nice and slow. Let your shoulders fall. Your thoughts can soften now, like honey melting into warm milk. There's no rush. Nothing to plan. No need to remember who dropped the candid pear or which ambassador got tarted in the eye. Just the rhythm of your breath, the soft hum of the night, and the easy certainty that history, no matter how odd, is always more fun when you're in the middle of it. Your eyelids are heavier now. Good. Let them rest. The past will still be here in the morning. For now, sleep. You've earned it. Sweet dreams.